Where do you stand? Can a closet full of gadgets take the place of a brain filled with skills? Today on the Carefree Cook's Code, I'm Chef Todd Moore, and this is the Carefree Cook's Code, every Tuesday live at noon Eastern. Here's our challenge. How can home cooks cook freely with creativity, confidence, and pride while ignoring recipes and still impressing themselves and others with what they cook? Well, the answer is found in becoming empowered with how cooking works, using dependable and repeatable methods of cooking that work for any ingredient, for any diet, and any desire, just like chefs do. And we'll know we've cracked it when everyone sees cooking as an exciting and rewarding way to improve their relationships, their lifestyles, and their health through better food and cooking. This is the Carefree Cook's Code. Welcome back, everyone. It's Tuesday at noon on the East. We're live. Welcome back to the Carefree Cook's Code. We're reaching Carefree Cooks all over the world. I understand we're even reaching Waxahachie, Texas today. Hey, Chris. Hey, everyone that's joining us. Heidi and Eileen and Eloisa and Debbie, welcome. We're live every Tuesday at noon. If you didn't get the messenger, and people are telling me they're not getting their messengers, all you got to do is go to webcookingclasses.com/live and register for my alert system there. 15 minutes before we're live, you'll get an alert system because you want to be part of what goes on, right? We're the Carefree Cooks. We create our own recipes. This brings friends and family together, and we learn every time we cook, so it gets better next time, right? We define our own cooking styles because we practice pro methods and we love our cooking. That's what the Carefree Cooks community is all about. More and more people joining us. Hey, Bear, Sherry is with us, Peter from South Florida, Kay in Savannah, and Arlene joining us as well. That's great on a Tuesday. Hopefully the weather's going to get warmer for us soon. Hopefully the farmers markets will be opening, one of the greatest food and cooking times of the year, but all that stuff is still to come on future Tuesdays. Today, I got a true or false for you. Here's this week's true or false. Tell me in the comments below. The statement is, kitchen gadgets always save you time. True or false? Write it in the comments below because that's what I want to talk about today. Pardon me. Because there's been such a debate in our Carefree Cooks community lately about people and their gadgets. People purchasing, I'm going to buy this one, or does anyone have a suggestion for that one? Or people even, the other side of the spectrum, pulling out one of grandma's old gadgets and mostly asking what the heck is this because nobody uses it anymore. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, because when you think about old school versus new school, when you're preparing your food for cooking. Okay, so I want to separate this into two separate discussions for now. One is in preparing the food for cooking. The other is in the cooking. And I'm not here to make any judgments today. We're going to talk about that as well. Don't think, Chef Todd's going to beat up on me because I have a gadget or things that plug into the wall. That's not the case, and we'll get to that as well. But the first thing that we're going to talk about is the actual food preparation, something other than the actual cooking. And there are really only 4 basic preparation tasks that you're going to need to decide, old school or new school, when you're putting your meal together. Cutting. It's one of the first things that you need to figure out. You're going to wind up with whole food, hopefully, okay? Because that's a good step, just that you're cooking with whole food. So you got a whole something, all right? An onion, a carrot, or something, and you have to cut it into smaller pieces to be able to cook with it. Cutting is one of the things you're going to have to do. Perhaps grating or pureeing needs to be done in preparation for cooking your food, no matter what you're doing. Mixing. You're going to have to mix things together. If you're baking, certainly mixing is the most important part of baking. Baking is not the most important part of baking. The oven part, mixing is, but that's a whole nother day. Another soapbox I can get on. Grinding. You might have to grind spices. You might have to use nuts or harder items that you're going to use in your cooking. So other than the actual cooking, these are the 4 things that you're going to have to do. Cutting, grating or pureeing, mixing, and grinding. So, you can either go old school or new school with these things. If you go to the old school, you're part of the people whose cutting tools involve the only 4 knives that you will ever need in your kitchen. There's only 4. I don't care what the guy says on late night TV with a set of 25. I don't care if the butcher block that looks so pretty has 18 steak knives that come with it. I don't know when you've ever cooked steak for 18 people, but nonetheless, there are 4 knives you need in your kitchen. They're the chef's knife, the boning knife, the paring knife, and the slicing knife. And you've heard me talk about this a gazillion times because this is the first thing we teach in culinary school, but it's lesson 8 in web cooking classes. I'll explain that another time, but it's very, very important. So important that it's lesson 8 in web cooking classes. All right, so we're going to get to that part and why that is. So with these 4 knives, the only 4 knives you need in your kitchen, that's the old school. That's the hand way of doing things. If you're going to go to the new school, the one that just got built, you remember so many fond memories of your elementary school and your high school, but they tore it down and they put up this sleek new one where they're not teaching long addition anymore. And if you're going to have to cut in a new school way, well, you might get yourself a mandolin. Now, you might consider this a gadget, and the mandolin, by the way, the scariest product in the kitchen. I've never cut myself in 20-something years of doing knife skills demonstrations, teaching culinary school classes. I used to do demonstrations blindfolded, where I would cut everything blindfolded. I have never cut my fingers, except on a mandolin. This stuff is so scary. But I'll tell you, if you want to cut something like see-through thin, if you want to do really thinly sliced potatoes, there was a trend many years ago where things were being wrapped in potatoes. Like you would take a fish fillet, cut potatoes in a mandolin, like paper thin, egg wash the fish and stick the potato slices to it so it looked like scales. This was a food trend for a while. I don't care how good you are with your knife, you're not going to get them paper thin. So a mandolin could be a new school way of doing your prep. A food processor, right? You get the blade where you push the plunger down and it slices the potatoes for you. That might be the way for you to go new school when it comes to cutting. But if you have to do any grating or pureeing and you're of the old school fashion, well, you've got a food mill. The thing where you grind and it pushes the items. That's really old school. I don't even have a food mill. To me, yeah, a food mill is a waste of time. But you know what I bet you do have somewhere? You got one of those box graters, don't you? The thing that grates your knuckles? You know, the thing that with the cheese and then your hand slips or the cheese gets real small. Box grater is the old school way to grate things. Or maybe you have grandma's potato masher, you know, the wire thing that you can mash and you can grate nuts and mash up beans and so on with it. But if you're going to the new school, you're probably using your food processor to cut things up, to turn it into dust with a flip of a switch. Or you have a Vitamix or a Ninja blender that you can just zap everything together. And then you get to mixing. Well, of course, if you're in the old school where mixing, you've got a whisk. And if you're like me, you have a favorite whisk, or you have a number of whisks for different jobs. You're old school. I'm definitely old school in that fashion. Maybe you have a hand mixer, you know, even if it's the electric one, or it's the old egg beater, kind of the crank egg beater that grandma has that you might find on the wall of an antique shop, right? That'd be your old school way to mix things together. Your new school way, KitchenAid mixer. If you're going to make bread, before I could afford my mixer when I was a culinary student, I used to come home and make bread by hand almost every night. And then when you get your mixer, you just realize why mixers were made. So yeah, that's a new school thing that I have to have. I know whenever I make doughs or breads, or how about whipping egg whites or whipping cream? Man, you could get one Popeye forearm if you don't have a KitchenAid mixer. That's the new school. The electric hand mixer the kind that Mom used way back when, the kind where you licked the beaters when she was doing chocolate cake, right? Or if you're grinding in the old school, you're doing a mortar and pestle. Cool rock type thing where you grind the spices like a medieval apothecary and you get the aromatics of it as you smash them up, right? That's the old school way to do it. The new school, you probably have an electric spice grinder or a coffee grinder. You put all the stuff in there, you push the button, bzz, 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 and all your spices are ground for you. Whether you're going to go old school or you're going to be new school, the discussion today is it worth the time that you saved? Is it worth the money in the time that you saved? Does it always save you time? And that's the true or false question today. So all we've talked about so far are really the basic tools that you need. You can make your own choices depending on the food that you're preparing, the number of people you're cooking for. I'll tell you, you're a lot more likely to need plug-in-the-wall gadgets if you're cooking for a lot of people. But old school, new school, new school is what I meant to say. Decide if the time saved is worth the money spent. But, this is where I'm drawing a line, because that was all very easy for me to get through. Okay, that was all. Yes, I certainly would use a knife before I would use any kind of chopper dicer device. Okay, so I'm old school. If you have a chopper dicer device that you really like, then you're new school in that. So everybody, I find, is one side or the other. Everybody is actually both sides. I mean, you have a toaster, right? You're not gonna use a brulee torch to try and toast a piece of bread. Everybody has to have some kind of plug-in-the-wall gadgets, right? But I want to see where you are on the time scale, and I'll give you my opinion about it in just a minute. But let me warn you about something, okay? Let me warn you about needing a specific gadget or tool to accomplish a specific task. Because, heavens, what if you were without that tool one day? What if, oh my goodness, what if you couldn't find your vegetable peeler? Could you still do it with a paring knife? What if you couldn't find your shrimp deveiner? What if you couldn't locate your apple corer or your citrus sectioner? Could you still do the job with some basic knives? This is the frightful part. If you use these things as a crutch, then they're bad. But if you use them as a way to increase your time, make it easier in the kitchen, they're good. It's like everybody has a calculator now, but I still want to know how to do long addition or long multiplication. I still want to be able to do math in my head, because goodness sake, what if I were out without a oh, well, of course everybody has a calculator on their phone now. Just what my elementary school teacher, her biggest fear, that was always her argument. Well, you're not always going to have a calculator, Todd. You know what, elementary school teacher? I do. I always have a calculator with me now. Nonetheless, if we're going to go back that far, then we need to go way back to this time. This is about 1983. There is young Todd as a lifeguard. I used to teach swimming to young kids in the summers. This is second year of college, I think. I don't know why I'm looking the opposite way of where all the people in the pool are. That's not a good job for a lifeguard to do. So here's the thing. When I would teach swimming to little kids, and I enjoyed doing this, and it was always a fun time, because you would see the kids all summer long come to the pool that I worked at, and you'd see their skills progress. They'd be like, hey Todd, look, now I can do this, now I can look that. But the one thing that I would never allow in my cooking classes, in my swimming classes, and the cooking classes for that matter, nose plugs. Right? The kids that show up with the rubber band around their head and the nose plugs were forbidden in my swimming classes. Goggles were forbidden in my swimming classes. Unless it was a medical reason, earplugs, any kind of these crutches were forbidden in my class, because I had the same theory. What if you ever fell in the water and didn't have your nose plugs? You would think I'm not able to swim at all. Without my nose plugs, goggles, earplugs, swim fins, armbands, whatever accoutrement that you need before you touch the water, you will not be able to perform the tasks of swimming if you don't have them. Once you can swim, plug your nose any way you want, that's great, but my job is to teach you to swim, so no nose plugs. And that was the idea. And this is where I get to with a lot of these cooking items, with a lot of these gadgets. Wouldn't you rather be able to swim on your own? Wouldn't you rather know that you could swim without nose plugs? But, maybe you choose to wear the nose plugs anyway. Maybe the nose plugs make you swim faster or give you more confidence. You could swim without them, but you're going to use this kind of little crutch or the thing that makes you feel better. So this is where I get to the other side of this argument. Cutting and chopping and all that, good. You can be old school, new school, doesn't matter. But when it comes to the actual cooking, when it comes down to the time to apply the heat to the food, this is where everyone has got to fall into one category or another. This is where you are nose plugs or no nose plugs, right? Because ultimately, it all comes down to convenience or curiosity. You want to use a mandolin versus a knife, fine. You want to use a food processor or a mixer versus a whisk, that's great. That all gets up to the point where you're going to apply the heat. But once we apply the heat, you're in one of two camps, nose plugs or no nose plugs. And one of the carefree cooks of longest standing, our friend Don, who's a great asset to our community, well, Don put it best this week as this conversation raged on in our community. Don says one group focuses on the end result as the accomplishment, and they want to get there as easily and as fast as possible. Okay, again, no judgments, but the other group focuses on the cooking itself. And while the results are the end goal, still want to eat something great, right? The true joy is in the journey to get there. So think about those two things for a minute. Whether you use a chopper, dicer device or not, or whether you use a knife, which, when it comes down to the heat, are you on? You just want to get a meal on the table, and that's good. That's fine. Or do you enjoy the process of it all? Do you like where you get to? Because remember, no judgments here. If you're on the nose plug side of things with the gadgets and stuff, if you're on the nose plugs side, I understand why you got a crock pot. I mean, I know why you have a sous vide stick, an Instacooker, an air fryer, or, special pans that are supposed to do the work for you. I know why you have those things. You're probably pressed for time. And it's a fair trade. Time for an item that's going to make your cooking time less. Maybe you got a really busy schedule. You got a lot of responsibilities. And I can see where you think cooking is really just a bothersome chore that takes up more of this time that you don't have. I understand this. I mean, I really do. I've worked with so many people for so many years, and I hear it again. And look, at least, like I said, I appreciate that you're cooking, okay? You're cooking food. You're getting wholesome food from the grocery store or the farmer's market. You're getting whole foods. And even if you do use a gadget or a cooking gadget, good for you on that level, because a lot of people don't even go that far. They're stuck at the drive-thru. They're stuck with microwaved food. They don't even need a knife when your dinners are peel back the plastic and put it in the microwave. So good for you if you're using whole food, no matter how you're cooking it, but you're still on team nose plugs, okay? On the other hand, if you feel like you don't need nose plugs to swim, if you feel like you could jump in whether you had your earplugs and your goggles or not, if you really enjoy the journey involved in learning something new, that's when it's really cool. And this is how I solved this whole nose plug thing. Because when I used to teach swimming, one of the first lessons I used to do was get the kids to blow bubbles out of their noses with their heads under the water, right? Because if air is coming out of your nose, water can't come in. And even little kids get this concept. So they used to love, all right, everybody put your head under the water, blow bubbles out your nose. They loved the sensation, right, of the bubbles streaming up past their ears to the surface. They'd get up, they'd giggle, they'd laugh, they'd have to watch each other blow bubbles. We'd see who could blow bubbles the longest. And then the kids sitting on the side, right, the kids who would not give up the nose plugs, well, they tossed those frickin' nostril crutches to the side in a heartbeat when they saw how much fun everybody else was having from blowing bubbles out their nose. It was a snotty mess, but it was a great lesson. If you love the process, right? If you enjoy the smells, the feels, the process of cooking, if you love the journey toward that creation, to the thing that you did yourself, and if you like gaining skills with each meal you cook, well, that's the path to becoming a carefree cook. That's what we talk about. We're the people that cherish a certain saute pan, right? Do you have a favorite pan? Just like one you think you have a connection with, Because this is your vessel of creativity. No wonder you love it. Your creativity, your joy comes out of it. There are people who love their knives. I have one knife generally I use and I name it, There are people that have only a few pans, or people that are obsessed with their spice rack, or people that are constantly trying to set a prettier and prettier plate, looking at their presentation and their plating and so on. These are the things that are like blowing bubbles out of your nose to me, right? So if you're a curious cook, if you enjoy the process, and if you learn every time you cook, where you arrive at is this sense of accomplishment, right? This sense of pride when you nail it, when you nail a certain dish and you are so proud and you love your cooking, you don't need nose plugs for that. And maybe unless you're chopping onions. But that's not going to help anyway. So leave the nose plugs out of the kitchen entirely. But I'm telling you that if you're pressed for time and you're relying on gadgets, there is a way to cook freely with creativity and confidence that is just as quick as the gadgetry, and you gain all this pride. You gain all this sense of accomplishment, which for me is what it's really about. So yes, I use a mixer, an electric mixer. I use a food processor to slice things sometimes. I have my stick blender when I want to puree things. I don't care how good you are with your chef's knife. You're never going to puree something, right, with a chef's knife. So some things I really, really need. But when it comes down to the heat, man, I love my saute pan. I love putting the oil in it. I love seeing the changes. I love the psh. I love the hearing. I love the smelling. I love the, whoa, it's getting too hot, cool it down, or ooh, it's too cold, heat it up, or all the things involved in it. These are the things that I love in cooking, and to me, this is the joy that the gadgetry takes away. These are the nose plugs. These gadgets, the sous vide stick, is the nose plugs of freedom in cooking, is the ability to swim to the other side of the pool and then turn around and swim back. So that's my feeling of old school, new school. I don't judge. I want you to cook at home, regardless of how you apply the heat to food, but I think it's beneficial to be able to do the long addition, to throw another analogy in there. It's time for a dish of the week, by the way, and the dish of the week today, let me see if I can let you guess. That looks like an awful mess, doesn't it? What is all that stuff? Who the heck? That's Carl's mess. Carl, you did it. There's a mess. You know what Carl did? Carl took garbage. Carl took onions, he took carrots, he took celery, he took parsnips, parsley stems and ends that he had been saving in the freezer for days or weeks, a gallon and a half of water, a bunch of peppercorns, simmered for 4 hours, and he wound up with vegetable stock that he could put in ice cube trays and put it in the freezer. That's a mark of a carefree cook. You want to know if somebody's a carefree cook or not? You might be, to borrow Jeff Foxworthy's routine, you might be a carefree cook if you find yourself freezing freshly made stock in ice cube trays, because you know that your sauces are going to be better, you know your steamed items are going to be better, your poached items are going to be better, your simmered items are going to be better, your soups are going to be better when you made your own stock out of garbage. Carl made it out of garbage. Good for you, Carl. There was another one I wanted to share with you before we run out of time today, but I wanted to tell you what Ruth wrote me. It really didn't have a lot to do with cooking. It had a lot to do with shopping. And Ruth wrote and said that she just wanted to share the differences that she's seeing since taking a few of our web cooking classes. And the differences aren't happening in the kitchen. The differences are happening in the grocery store. Okay, now with the tens of thousands of comments that I've gotten over the past 20 years of teaching, this is one of the greatest and unique, because she says that she went grocery shopping and for the first time wasn't intimidated at all. that there's this intimidation factor in the grocery store, right? She went there without a list, except for a few necessary items like bread, things like that. But she didn't think about what she wanted to buy ahead of time. She went over to the meat section. She looked at the meats. She didn't like any of the meats, so she didn't buy meat. Just because it was on her list, or might not have been on her list, it didn't look good. She went over to the butcher's area. She found chicken breasts. Those she thought looked really, really good. And then this was the thing. It immediately came to her what she wanted to cook. She says, then immediately I began to think what I wanted to cook. I just knew. It just came to me. No questions, she says. Weird. For me, anyway. I like it. So, Ruth, I don't communicate with people telepathically. I just want to assure you that I'm not in your head. But this idea of carefree cooking means that you can go to the grocery store. You can pick any ingredient that looks good, is in season, that you're curious about, apply our basic methods, and come out with something great. So we took away the intimidation factor for Ruth out of the grocery store. Thank you so much for sharing that with us this week. The true or false that we talked about today, I hope I didn't sound too biased. I was trying to give you an idea that we all are on both sides of the gadgetry, but because the word always is in there, no, kitchen gadgets don't always save you time. A lot of times they actually cost you time, and we can talk about that another time. But no, this is false. They don't always. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They don't always save you time. I'm going to push this other button that I need to push to see what everybody is talking about today. Here we go. Let's go back here. Hi, everyone. Mary likes making stock. That's good. We all like making stock. Taking stock of our stock. Let's see what everyone's talking about. A few connection problems people are talking about. Thank you for the hearts and the thumbs up. They go too fast, these comments for me. Learning, practicing, that's good. A lot of food for thought. Good pun. I like that. I hope you realize the difference you've made in our lives. Thank you very much. That's really kind. I appreciate that. I love doing it. I mean, like I said last week, I've done demonstrations for nobody. When nobody showed up, I still do it. I still like doing it. It's warms my heart to see that there's 167 people with us right now. I'm looking for questions that people answering, asking. I answer. They ask. If I finally. Good. People are telling me about how much they love their carefree cooking. They go to the fridge, they cook it up, no recipes, makes it easy, makes it creative. I love that. Good to see. I don't know. I'm going to have to get on here later and answer the questions. There are just too many, and they're going so fast. I read the first sentence of one, and then it scrolls down to another. Everybody has a few favorite electrical appliances. I agree with that, and I think that's probably a lot of the point of what we talked about today. If you've got a few that you really love because you do slice potatoes really thinly with the mandolin, or you do puree things with the food processor, or there is that night of the week that everybody has a requirement, a job that they're working late, or kids have soccer practice or something, and that's the Instapot meal night. That's the crock pot night. That's the night that we don't have time to do it, and that's fine. Again, I don't judge anybody. Cooking is what I want you to do, no matter how you do it. But knowing these underlying skills, and then maybe on the weekend is when the family gets together and cooks. We all feel that sense of accomplishment and pride. That's really the point here. So thank you, everyone, for your comments about that today. If you liked what we talked about today, please share this with someone. Share these videos because there might be somebody who's stuck right in between old school and new school, or they're feeling badly about having too many gadgets that they don't use. It's okay. Gadgets are fine. They're part of your culinary journey toward becoming a carefree cook yourself. So like our video, please, and share it with your friends. And if you know someone that would love to start their own culinary journey and become a carefree cook themselves, you have to warn them that there are going to be 5 forks in this road they'll come to, and they're going to have to make the decisions correctly. And my guidebook, The 5 Forks to Carefree Cooking, cooking can help them decide which fork in the road to take and become a carefree cook like the rest of us. So thank you, everyone, for being with me again live on Tuesday. Make sure you go to my alert system again, because I'm getting sneaky with the lives. There's going to be a lot of stuff I'm not even going to announce. I'm just going to pop up. So webcookingclasses.com/live is where you want to register as well. And until then, it's Chef Todd Moore reminding you that there's a method to your cooking success. Bye-bye.